What is this? What is this background transition go to? Rank with grease and heat. The kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone. But one last battle remained. Dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか?
Oh shit, it's Sojiro. His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだから、もう笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。これも商店街の明日のためなんだとよ。本気で申し訳ないんだが、雨も止んだし、なんとか行ってきてくれないか？無事帰ってきたら晩飯おごってやっから。
He's making Sojiro do an errand and to reward his food. His bright orange coworker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task. "10 years ago, Mizaki City was a town of farm and woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with tall, multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiro Inuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiro Inuzuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of town, was no exception to that convention and had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground in development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Haunted house. Aoka Ozaki traversed the long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Mizaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it. But unfortunately, Mizaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that made their arduous climb worthwhile, and today she had been denied even that.
雨の日は自転車も使えないし、1日に2回ぐらいバスでも通ってくれないもんかな、ほんと。
Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
I assume Alice is Aoko's roommate. With a wary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her home. Seems like one hell of a long day, huh? There sits atop that hill a haunted house. That is how the story much shared around town used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one Aoko wished to discredit the most. The final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in the wood on top of a hill, no one dared to approach. Like a ruin, and shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house. The house was the, I don't know how you can pronounce it, Kuonji Mansion. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. The witch's house. That sounds like one hell of a title I've heard of from the RPG Maker game, but that has nothing that is unrelated to it, so. It was an unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Ozaki resided for reasons known only to her. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Kuonji family home was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high iron fence covered in thorny vines. That's one way to put security. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of the hill was a cause for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here.
ま、私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
Well, ain't that some shit. She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have paired well with a brass lock, and yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Damn, it's almost like this. Oh. Well, I hope you lock the gate and do that shit, but whatever. Oh, wow. I didn't even notice. If I do it at the bottom of the screen, it reveals the image. Okay. I mean, the previous scenes were awkward enough as is to catch a glimpse of. She entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Aoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest. But knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up the wall to the second floor hall. There was a third floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. The Koanji mansion was more or less divided into 2 wings, east and west. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you in a storybook world or lead to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. Yeah. Living in a big-ass house with only 2 people living there. Aoko's room was at the end of the East Wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason other than that she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That was the extent of what she brought from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. Well, she'd also borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ。アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was not a room. It was a room for the person she would eventually become, a place of solitude that only she could enter, or so she thought.
うわ、壊れてるどころか跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ。笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
The nosy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach for optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the first floor. Yeah, wearing a sweater. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing into the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered the nearby doorway. Well, at least you have a TV in the room. I guess that's your sort of entertainment, I guess. It had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and a luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. Yeah, see, there you go. Wow. It stood looking over the other furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Aoko, it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed this modern comfort.
なんだ、人のことは言えないか。うちも案外時代錯誤な家だった。
Now, in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. It's almost like hours passed on, as is. Oh, yeah. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Aoko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup, but the tea within had gone completely cold. She asked the question to the girl on the other side of the table. Well, no shit, you doze off. It's like you were... Surely you didn't have enough sleep. The girl answered without lifting her gaze. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Aoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Aoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her gently arched neck was so lovely that even Aoko found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Kuonji, and she was the same age as Aoko.
私、どれくらい寝てた？
1時間と少し。ここで眠ると風邪ひくわよ。
1 hour. Alice answered indifferently, not that it bothered Aoko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. What the hell? What is it? I'm pretty sure it was more than that. How do I back out of here? Pretty sure it's this. There we go. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little the night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
起こしてくれてもよかったのに。せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
Damn. No alarm clock.
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。行ってみただけよ。
Aoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Koonji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
こうなると、フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。おかえり、アリス。玉の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。
Gee, I wonder.
今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけど、お参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Aoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Aoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Aoko gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
Aoko tried to laugh it off as if it was someone else's problem.
どういうこと？
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて一日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら跡形もなく消えてました。
Unfortunate.
怒る？アリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょ。代用品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。
Well then.
それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの？
She sure is called out on that one. Oops. I didn't even not mean to do that. Alice was very much on point today. It was true that despite outward appearances, Aoko was seething with frustration. That aside.
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。
A real piece of work.
すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下って言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name, but Aoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。
Well, yeah, I know. Your boy, Sojiro was gonna go, Super Mario out the out the window. I don't know. Yeah, that's something.
そいつ教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。ええ、それはそれでまだ流せる。許容範囲よ、あの程度の冗談は。
I don't know. It's like those two are, being more awkward, and then by the time I guess Sojiro, trying to yeet out the window to change things, I guess. Yeah, attempting to.
で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。
He's jotting down notes in his head.
まあ、一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人、気にするたちだったの
？Calling someone an idiot is, apparently so, I guess.
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど、明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのか、ちょっと心配なだけ。
What she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of his head.
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
So not only she called him an idiot, she also calling him a weirdo too.
三問一回はいい言葉ね。
You two would probably hit it off great. That's hit it off great. That's another word for you two would probably get along. But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Aoko gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作。スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
Spiritual evolution based on the spiritual diary.
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。
A knockoff?
彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Aoko seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Aoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど。
Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Ozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
That seems one hell of a work-life balance, if you ask me.
ならいいけど。
The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was...
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
Today's failure was not a colossal one. It does seem like a bit of an exaggeration, I don't know. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
Damn, how do you balance serious business? Monka W. She had only known for sure for the last year and a half, but she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was little wonder that her morals and conscience, or whatever you call it, had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
OK、アリス。来週中に決着をつけよう。
Next week.
それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Aoko could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
Still beyond my abilities.
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Aoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Aoko decided to tune into a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Aoko that the sound her sound her cute little roommate made what just now was different than the what she blurted in times past.
何？
That's one heck of an expression there. It's like her eyes sparkle in curiosity is what happened. Aoko turned down the volume on the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat.
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Oh no. Oh god. That's the first time I've seen Alice made that face. Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If he could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Aoko nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない、本当に意味のないことよ。けど、どう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
Her face is like she made that WTF face after Alice asked her that question. For a second, Aoko thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Aoko, this story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Aoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
いいの。私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ、理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て、出前のてんやものを届けに行くことって、そんなに簡単かしらね。
Is she talking about Sojiro? Maybe she's referring to it as that because there's something to do with the his part-time job at the restaurant. I mean, it has to be. I can't really think of anything else besides that.
難易度以前に
Cat-sized
それをやる
suit.
人間の常識性を疑うけどね、私は。
Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
まあ、世の中いろいろあるから、私たちみたいなのもいれば、下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ。私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに。
I know. Anyways, good morning.
で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Order in. Time to order for a food delivery. Aoko loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. Yeah, like... I know this game takes place in, like, 1980s and such, but it's like... Motherfucker's gonna Uber eat some fucking food. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants in Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
Oh yeah, they're definitely ordering food at this sort of evening. I mean, it's I'm pretty sure it's common, so. The hungry student council president laid out a stack of takeout menus like she might fan a deck of cards, and excitedly scanned for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparring so much as a glance.
悪いけど、私夕飯済んでるの。
Well, that was something. With those words, Aoko froze. She froze in disappointment. Does this remind me of the meme of my disappointment is immeasurable? All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared, the minimum number of the orders will be 3 starting next year. Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。
Uh-oh. She's mad.
帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ。
Unfortunately for Aoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。
Oh shit.
そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。
Jeebus Christ is all I can say from this response.
私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was unknown how serious Aoko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？
Damn. If all she had was tea, I didn't know she was this powerful. What the fuck?
あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話？
Aoko had kicked a hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
Are we arguing over food? That's funny. Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned toward Aoko.
聞きたい。
I guess so.
まあ、なんとなく。
Are you sure you want to know? Aoko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. Just like that. Little happening of last night. New book added to archives. Wait a minute, can I just save here? Wait a minute. Let's see. There we go. New book happening in archives. Yeah, that's one way to end the long ass first episode. That's for damn sure.